Hi, my name is Gregory Parks, and you're watching Conlink. With us today is one of our guests of honor for this year's Convergence, a local author, a transplant from Chicago. He is an award-winning author, essayist. He's also a TV producer, a musician, and a chess enthusiast. Please welcome T. Aaron Cisco. T. Aaron, thank you for joining us today. It's good to see you.
Hi, Greg. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So I like your project cave that you have behind you. There's a lot to see, a lot to admire there.
Thanks. It's a little bit more chaotic. Actually, this is less chaotic than it usually is, but I wanted to make sure I, dressed it up just for you, so you could at least find me and I could sit on something without a mountain of glue and hot guns and other things toppling over.
Yeah, it's like, beautiful. And it does look, I will say, it does look remarkably organized for a project room. So well done. Congratulations.
Thank you. It is a very unique system. There is stuff that is on shelves and stuff that is not on shelves. And that's really the only categories I've got going right now. That's as far as I've gotten.
So I guess my first question is, when we first met, I had no idea that you were from Chicago. So what brought you from Chicago to the Twin Cities in the first place?
Well, yeah, I've been here for quite a while now. Just kind of the time flew by, about 15 years. Wow, yeah, it's been a while. But I came for two reasons. I came for a job, and then it's also my wife is originally from here. And she was very, very crafty. I give her all the credit. One, she's way smarter than I am, because that's one of the things I loved about her. It's like, oh, you're brilliant. That's so cool. But she was very cool while we were dating. So you got to visit my folks. You got to visit my friends. And then so we'd come up for things like the State Fair and the Aquatennial, May Day, all these events that took place during the warm part of the year. And I was like, oh, Minneapolis, it's just a few hours drive. It's still the Midwest. Winters can't be that bad. Must be exaggerating. So I moved up here back quite some time ago. And that first winter, I was like, oh, so you guys here in Minnesota, you do winter like for real. Like it gets cold in Chicago, but this is like you guys are professionals. It's like when you think you're a good cook, and then like one of your friends finishes culinary school and they start whipping stuff up. Like, oh, I can make like oh no, you're definitely the professional. You are the master.
Were you already writing when you were living in Chicago, or when did when were you taken over by writing? When did you become so inclined toward writing that was what you devoted time and energy and craft to?
Boy, not that long ago. I've always had ideas, and I loved like creating. And I sketch out little things like back in like the live journal days, even like MySpace, as I age myself again, way back in the old
Well, at least you
MySpace
didn't say
days.
Friendster.
I remember Friendster and High Five. Remember High Five back in '03?
I
It's like,
never
woo.
did High Five. I had a Friendster account for a while. Yeah.
But they had those little note sections, and you could like write little things. So every so often, I'd kind of write what in essence was like find and replace fanfic, because I would watch shows or movies, and there wasn't nearly as much then as there is now. And just say like, what would be cool is if they did this. So I'd have these sort of like unsolicited pitches to no one. Like, I think it would be cool to have like a Star Trek film that takes place in the Star Trek universe but has nothing to do with the Federation or Starfleet. Like things like that, or like what would this look like if like I want to see like just some schmuck who lives in a superhero universe. It's like I was obsessed with Spawn, still am a little bit, and Wonder Woman. I would love to see like Spawn end up in Themyscira, and then but there's just someone who witnesses this. So I'd write these kind of like goofy little things, maybe like 500 to 1,000 words, nothing big, just enough to say like, here's my ideas. And then after I started working in network in news journalism, I really wanted to get out and branch into more of the creative side of television. So I started writing pitches. One in particular, which eventually became my first book, Teleportality, was about a character named Billy, and Billy was just everything I couldn't find. I love Toni Morrison, and she has a great quote about like, if there's a story you want to read and you can't find it, then you must write it. And I've always believed that with all kinds of stuff, whether it's music or with my TV work or any endeavor. It's like, you know what, if no one else is doing it or I can't find it, rather than complaining about how someone should, then I'll be that someone and just do it. Maybe it's because of the whole 90s DIY thing, or just false too much hubris. Like no one ever told me like you're not supposed to do it. You're supposed to wait and like, find an agent and find this, and like you can't do this because you don't know how to, format for this and that or outline. So I did everything the hard way, which was a lot of fun. You learn a lot that way, definitely. But with Billy, I had this pitch. I was like, I want a female character that is not a femme fatale. There's no love interest. She is literally, her name actually canonically is Billy Badass because I just like that idea. Like here's like she is just as tough and just as cool as all these other male characters you have, especially in speculative fiction and Afrofuturism. But it just leaned so heavily towards male and male presenting characters. I was like, I want to see a woman do this, even though Billy technically is not a woman. She's more of like a reanimated corpse, but not like in a gross like iZombie kind of way. Oh, iZombie's not super gross. She's kind of yeah. But anyway, and eventually I kept pitching that around, finding out really quickly the hard way that the news world of broadcasting is completely different from the entertainment world of broadcasting. And I then came up with this idea. Well, I'll do a series Bible. I'll build a wiki with the whole universe, and then I'll have that as part of my pitch package, so I can say, look, I've got this great idea for a show, and everything you want to know about the show is here. But here's my proof of concept, here's my spec script, but I have this whole wealth of like story and world building to go. Uh, and I got so wrapped up in the world, but I was like, this is actually a lot of fun. And then finally, someone said, you know what, you've been working on this at that point for like 10 years. You should put this into an actual book and just get it out there. And of course, when I said that, then I had a meeting with one network again, almost like serendipitously, like someone up there, Flying Spaghetti Monster, Buddha, whoever, whatever you believe, they were like, this is going to be great. At the moment, I was like, I should write this. I should give up this whole thing about TV. I get a call from a decent network that wanted to take a meeting. I pitched it. All their notes were the exact opposite of everything that I was trying to accomplish. They were like, hey, what if in the middle of the opening scene, which is a motorcycle chase where she's being chased by what's in essence a giant hovercraft covered in missiles and things like that on her little motorcycle. They're like, what if she pulls over and like she meets some guy and then he can become the love interest that she has to save? I was like, what? I was like, first she's dead. Like she's not a person. That's necrophilia. It's super gross. Two, who does that? Who's like being chased by like a giant tank? It's like, you know what? I'd hit that. That's insane.
Speaking of people receiving your work, you back just earlier this year, you released a new bit of work, Rod String Nail Cloth, an Afrofuturist mixtape, and it's done pretty well on Amazon. Not to embarrass you, but it made a top 10 of 2 different lists. Yeah, so how about the process with that one? It's literally a mixtape. You have, some poetry, short pieces there, and you even incorporated some of your musical sensibilities into it.
Yeah, that was definitely a risky one. So, I'll be full confessional. We'll have our Gail King moment. Like
Oh,
I
sure.
love being an indie author. Love it. I get to design my own covers and I get to like again write about whatever I want. I can release like 2 books a year. I can release one and then take a long break while I work on the next one. Um, but I also definitely wouldn't mind, or just to see what it's like to be signed. So I've been looking for lit agents and things like that here and there, different publishers that I've talked to, and it wasn't working. And I was like, you know what? I don't care. For the next one, what's the least literary thing I can think of? And at that time, with a very limited imagination, I was like a mixtape. I'm gonna release a mixtape, just like all those cool rappers that are dropping mixtapes. I'm gonna make a mixtape, uh, and so I tried to do that because I wanted to push myself because I'm a huge fan of folks like Edgar Allan Poe and Eddie Okorafor, and I was like I've never done an epistolary style work, so I wanted to, and so all the things I wanted to try, all the things I loved, I was like I'm just gonna do it in one book, and then some friends were nice enough to say, well, that's not a book anymore. That becomes a collection. I was like, no, it's a mixtape. They're like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, yes, it totally does. It's a bunch of different stuff smushed together, and they're like, that's just like an anthology. It's not a mixtape. Mixtape, you have to listen. I was like, no one has tapes anymore anyway. There aren't any mixtapes. It's all digital. I use a computer to create these stories, which is also digital. It's all ones and zeros. And they're like, all right. But yes, that was basically Rod String Nail Cloth came from the idea of I wanted to throw everything out at once and kind of get it out. It was the second scariest thing after, because its predecessor was Black Mirror Blue Box, which is an autobiography, which was horrifying because with every other book, if someone, they're like, oh, I read it, I hate it. It's like, that's great. You hate that story. With Black Mirror Blue Box, they're like, oh, I hated it. It's like, you hate me. Like, that was
Yeah.
horrifying to throw it out there. And then Rod String Nail Cloth right after that was like, well, now I'm going to show how my mind works. This is what's going on up here. These are all my interests in weird picadillos. And The reception that I got was really fast and really positive so far, and it's been really fun seeing people react to different parts of it, especially like the poem was really hard because I was like, I love Poe, and one of the things that Poe does well is poetry. I guess that's pretty obvious. It's like, who else was a good writer? That Shakespeare fella. He's known to string a few words together. Uh, um,
He's okay.
but I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, he's done his stuff, or allegedly he's okay, unless
Yeah.
there's like other folks. But yeah, Rod Stringdale Cloth was I wanted to do like a real love letter to Afrofuturism in general, because I think so many folks with the buzz, the much deserved buzz of Black Panther back in a few years ago when that was
Yeah.
released, and then people are like, well, what is Afrofuturism? What is Afrofuturism? And getting out there, and there's been some great
Ah.
nonfiction books on the topic,
Yeah.
it feels like there needs to be just more attention. Of course, I'm all for that. That is my agenda. I apologize to the CVG-TV producers that I do have a manifesto. I definitely want to like just colorize the Twin Cities,
No.
colorize the art scenes because there's some great artists of color in every medium, every genre. And Afrofuturism is just one of them. And it's been around for so long, and it's just kind of nice that like, oh, what? People are interested a little bit. Super groovy. Let's flood them with what we can while we can, and then hopefully they'll have so much that they can't get rid of us.
Speaking of which, like, yeah, you can't get rid of us. We're here. We're not going anywhere. Yeah. Speaking of which, like, and that has been really nice seeing that spread and more people becoming aware and digging into it because, like, until a few years ago, I had no idea that W.E.B. Du Bois wrote what's considered the very first Afrofuturist
Yes.
work of speculative fiction, which was just amazing because I was familiar with his other works, with Souls of Black Folk, et cetera, and all that stuff. And then now, like, Itasha Womack published her books on Afrofuturism, and she's considered a leading scholar on Afrofuturism. And I mean,
I've always thought, well, not just always, but I think anyone who hears about Du Bois and just that era of like sort of like the 1920s, what was the lost gen for mainstream society or mainstream American society, was also like the Renaissance period, which was a lot longer than that. If you go from the early 20th century through the first 2-3 decades, and I know Renfest is huge here. It's a big thing nationwide, but I know that particularly in Minnesota, the Twin Cities specifically, we have a huge Minnesota Renaissance festival culture. But I thought, how groovy would it be to have a Harlem Renaissance festival?
that would
Same
be
thing,
amazing.
but instead of like vaguely 15th through the 17th century, because it is pretty loose out there at
Yeah.
Renfest. It's like this isn't quite, but instead of that, it's like, all right, early 20th century Harlem Renaissance Fest. We still have performers. There's still music in the games. There's still cosplay, except
Yeah.
just slightly different. A few, not as many corsets, but so many more spats, and the
Yeah.
world needs more spats. Going way off topic. So Rod Stringdale Cloth was a lot of fun because I got to push everything out. Actually, because you mentioned W.E.B. Du Bois' Afrofuturist, the Comet. Have you read it?
Yes,
Have you read the short story?
yes,
That's right. It's incredible that it still holds up. It's
it
been
does.
literally a century, and it's like this could have been written. I mean, some of the language is a little bit different in the meter and the rhythm, but aside from that, that could have been written yesterday. That could have been released in like some volume or some literary magazine. And I think that's one of the groovy things about Afrofuturism is that because it's so tied heavily to the cultural experience, because it's not just spec fic, and I love sci-fi and I love spec fic, but because it's tied so deeply ingrained with our experiences, meaning like that longevity. It's not just like, oh, this is what happened yesterday. It's sort of like this is what happened yesterday, but because of what happened yesterday, my reaction to it was based on the previous generation or generations or centuries of what all these other things that happened. That it almost makes everything timeless. I know there are definitely some examples that are not, and I'm not trying to say that my work is going to hold up 10 years, 100 years from now, but there's definitely that piece where, like, when you're drawing in, I think there's that instant relatability, and I think and hope that that's why Afrofuturism is kind of having its moment in the sun, is that people are seeing that it's more than just like, oh, these are cool stories about people with cool tech and cool situations that just happen to have lower SPFs. It's there's something more there. Like there's an extra layer, and I was hoping that with Rod Stringdale Cloth just trying to open some of those doors where it's like, all right, look, you might not want to sit down and read 200 pages about a woman who, if you consume her flesh, you gain superpowers for a little bit, which is the plot of Dragon Variation. It's an allegory, whatever. It sounds weird. That might not be your bag. That's fine. But could you read, 20 pages about a guy who accidentally wakes up pining for yesterday when, real musicians were doing real music, and then he wakes up in yesteryear and realizes, like, oh man, like, it was not cool to be a black dude trying to play real music. Like, I thought it wasn't cool. Now, like, holy crap, the '60s, this is not easy at all. So just trying to get people in. So that was kind of like pulling them in. Even the title, which is mildly pretentious, I'll admit. Rod, string, nail, cloth. The idea, like, these are the components of a ship, and we're all vessels. So the rod, string, nail, cloth, and even the title, the titular story, it's really about what makes us who we are when there's so much of who we are in all these other places. And that's as deep as I'll get, because it's all about fun.
You gave us so much of, so much, I think, good insight into who T. Aaron is and your process and the energy that you have behind what you do, and not only that, but the care. And I think people, if they were paying attention, would have gotten some really great insights and recommendations from you on how about pursuing their own dreams or their own ambitions. And also, you published a book during a pandemic after an uprising, and it sounds like that was could have even been a personal part of this, of the new piece. And as you said, that's part of the experience. It's not only just cool tech or a cool story, but there is some of self in there. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you for bringing your works to us. And we look forward to seeing you at Convergence 2021. It's happening in person. Thank you, T. Aaron.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. This has been fantastic.
Beautiful. I look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks. Thank you. And thank you for joining us here for ConLink. My name is Gregory Parks. We will see you next time.